Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wallace. I just wanted to do a little video about price discrimination. We went over it in class today, but we went over it very quickly. And I'm going to put up a few questions on Schoology, one free response question related to price discrimination, the other related to natural monopolies, so that way you get a little bit of practice with both of those. Don't be afraid to ask questions this weekend if you have any questions before Monday. But a little bit about price discrimination is in this video. Okay, and as we noted in class, the definition of price discrimination is really pretty broad. There's a variety of ways that firms might actually price discriminate. We're used to seeing this in a lot of different ways, but it's basically when you sell the same product to different buyers at different prices. And there's a variety of different ways that we can price discriminate. Some examples might be airline tickets, movie theaters, coupons. You know, if you go to a store and you use a coupon, or a football game. Maybe there is a student price. You know, we're used to seeing senior citizen prices, student prices. But in reality, there's a few different types of price discrimination. For example, first degree price discrimination, second degree, and third degree. Second degree price discrimination is something that we see all the time. We use it at BCA, for example. If we want to buy paper, we can buy just a few things of paper and we pay a lot of money for that. Or if we buy massive quantities of paper, you know, you buy over 100 packets of paper, you might get a reduced price. So that's another form of price discrimination. One consumer might have a lower price than another consumer because they're buying in bulk, right? So that would be an example of price discrimination. That's different than perfect price discrimination, where one firm is charging everyone a different price for the same product, or at least what they're willing to pay. And it's, you know, different from other forms of price discrimination also. In order for firms to price discriminate, price discrimination basically is after willingness to pay. And of course, you know, this makes a lot of sense. If you're the firm and you're looking to increase your revenue, you don't want to be in a position, as most profit maximizing monopolists are, where they have to reduce the price in order to sell more of the good. It'd be nice to be able to sell more of the good and actually not have to reduce the price, right? That's basically the bottom line between, you know, for price discrimination is people who are willing to pay a higher price, you want to charge them the higher price. And for people that can't charge the higher price, you don't want to exclude them from the market. You want to enable them to pay. And, you know, an example of this, of course, is the college market. And I have a daughter who is a senior, you know, so in October of this past year, you know, we dutifully filled out the FAFSA form. And, you know, that is because we're trying to inform colleges basically about our, you know, ability to pay. And colleges take that information and they work on a plan that is basically a price discrimination model. They look at what we are willing to pay and, you know, able to pay, and then they ultimately, you know, attach a price. If they, you know, wanted my daughter, you know, they attach a price that is perhaps going to be different than a price somebody else might pay. So, you know, we're all familiar with what price discrimination is, because as consumers, we are in a position of, you know, being sometimes a consumer paying a different price than somebody else. Generally, price discrimination is trying to, you know, determine how elastic or inelastic demand is. Elastic demand is, by definition, fairly price sensitive. So people who experience high price increases might stop demanding a particular good if they are very elastic. Inelastic demand, people continue to purchase a good despite price increases. So in order to price discriminate, because it is an advantage for the firm, if they are, so think of your typical college, for example, if they gave everybody, you know, the cheaper price because they were looking at, you know, what maybe the Wallaces pay, you know, it is something where if somebody can pay more, they want to ensure that they are getting maximum revenue. So if we look at price discrimination as a major benefit in terms of increasing revenue for the firm, you know, what would be the characteristics that would be required for a firm to be able to price discriminate? Perfect competitors cannot price discriminate because they are price takers, right? The price is set in the market. They don't have the ability to price discriminate. But if we look at somebody who has more extensive monopoly power, by definition, they might have more inelastic demand. There's no other options. We tend to see with competitors, kind of a reduction in inelasticity, especially if there's a lot of close substitutes. But you kind of want to have a good that there's not a lot of competition for. You must also be able to segregate the market. So you have to be able to say, this group is going to pay less because they're buying in bulk. This group is paying more. This group is paying less because their FAFSA says this. This group is paying more. You have to be able to segregate a market somehow. And we assume that consumers cannot resell the product. That would create a challenge in this theory, in the model. Okay, so one really common model is third-degree price discrimination. This is what we would look at if we actually have an elastic group and an inelastic group. So let's kind of look at this example as inelastic and this group as elastic. Basically, this is a firm that we might suggest, just like airlines or other firms that sell the same product for different prices, sometimes this is based on characteristics about the consumer. So third-degree graphical analysis is going to show us an example where we are looking at, say, software. Let's say that this is Adobe Acrobat. I know when you pay for a laptop, right? Maybe you're going to buy Adobe Acrobat, and maybe the price for Adobe Acrobat might be fairly high if you're a small business. And small businesses might have inelastic demand. In other words, when the price is high, we see a steeper demand curve because there's not that great degree of a quantity bump. There is some. It's not perfectly inelastic by any means. If we lowered the price, we might see a increase in quantity demanded, but at the same time, it's a fairly steep demand curve that tells us it's relatively inelastic. This suggests that even when the price, is high and increases quite a bit, it's much higher, for example, than the price for students. At that high price, we still are going to have the quantity of quantity QB. And we can look at where the monopolist might profit maximize and what the revenue would be. This green box is suggesting this is total revenue. In the case of our students, right, which is much more elastic. We have a flatter demand curve. If we were to see an increase in the price, we would expect that we would have a very, very, very big drop in quantity. And if we lower the price, we have a very big increase in quantity. That's what it is to be elastic or very price sensitive. So at this lower price of PS, we actually get a significant number of students. And what we would be doing is looking at this total revenue 2, and adding it to total revenue 1. So in this case, because they're price discriminating, the firm doesn't have to worry that if they charge this high price, in order to get quantity QB, maybe they're going to lose all of their students, right? Maybe no student is going to buy the good, at that high price. They would be completely off their, demand curve. There's no student demand at that high price. But in order to get the students to add to their total revenue, because this degree of total revenue is small, even though it's smaller than the other total revenue, certainly want to add it to our total revenue, right? We'd like to add TR1 and TR2 together. And so we're getting greater total revenue. And for the firm, looking at this from the firm's perspective, this is really all about the increase in total revenue, right? Because you're squeezing out every single consumer who might be interested in buying your product. And rather than saying, let's do the smaller price for the students, rather than having a lower price for everyone and selling at PS and not necessarily... Sorry, custodial staff came in wanting to clean the room. You basically are seeing an advantage for a firm in adding to total revenue when they can charge a lower price for one group that would otherwise not buy the good, right? They would be, prohibited from buying the good, but you also get a chance to maximize, revenue with the group that's willing to pay the higher price, right? And as long as you can segregate those two groups, you can get a student price and a small business price. The small businesses are fine paying the higher price, and students appreciate the lower price. As long as you can segregate the markets, you can maximize your total revenue. Okay, so for the purposes of the AP exam, what you're mostly going to be looking at is an example of first-degree price discrimination. I know it sounds like a burn, like a first-degree burn, but first-degree price discrimination is also known as pure or perfect price discrimination. This is given the idea that rather than a typical demand curve, okay, where every single time you want to sell more of a good, every single time you want to increase the quantity, you have to lower and lower and lower the price. This is kind of assuming that there isn't going to be a single price. Rather, the monopolist is going to charge every single consumer the price that they are willing to pay. Okay, so there's no consumer surplus in this model because no consumer gets a good deal. You know, it sounds disastrous for the consumer because they ultimately are never going to pay a price lower than what they're willing to pay. There will be zero consumer surplus. The way that we looked at a typical monopoly model, okay, was always the case that there's a downward sloping demand curve and that marginal revenue was less than demand, okay? The reason for that is because typically every single time the monopolist wanted to sell more, they had to lower the price for every single good, right? Even if they were selling 4 units instead of 3, they had to lower the price on all 4 units, not just the extra unit that they were trying to sell. In the case of pure price discrimination, okay, we run into a situation where there is no single price, okay? If we sell 1 unit, right, person's willing to pay $10, the price is $10, the marginal revenue is also $10, right? The firm has gotten an additional $10. If they sell 2 units, they're selling the first one for $10 and the second one for $9, right? Not both for $9, but the second one for $9. So, you know, the price is $9 and the additional unit, the additional marginal revenue is $9 into the producer's pocket. Then again, if they sell 3, right, they've gotten the $10 from the first consumer, $9 from the sale at least of the second good, and then $8 from the sale of the third good, okay? So again, in this case and everywhere after, the price and the marginal revenue will be exactly the same. That tells us in perfectly price discriminating models, we only have a demand curve. The demand curve is equal to the marginal revenue curve, okay? So when you look to profit maximize and you go to figure out, well, where is MR equal to MC, your MR and your demand curve, your MR and your price are basically going to be exactly the same. So this tells us a regular monopoly, okay? So let's look at this as a model of a regular monopoly. This is a profit maximizing, unregulated monopoly. Okay, how do we know that? Because we see an MR that's less than demand, okay? We also know that the ATC curve is not demonstrating only economies of scale. It does not look like a natural monopoly. And if we were told this was a regulated monopoly, we could be in the position of experiencing a price ceiling or something like that. But assume that this is an unregulated monopoly, and we're interested now in looking at the difference between this monopoly and a model that would be perfectly price discriminating. Okay, so here's our monopoly. Let's say that this is Kyle's firm, and Kyle is selling yo-yos. This is Kyle's yo-yos. And in this case, we know the profit maximizing quantity is where MR equals MC. So our quantity is going to be here, and our price is going to be at PM. And you can see the profit that is shaded here. And if I wanted to, I could note the entire revenue, right? I'm using price to determine my revenue. My total revenue would be my price times my quantity. So my per unit revenue is here, right? And then if I multiply, price times the quantity, I could see my entire total revenue as that red box, okay? And the profit is just going to be my total revenue minus my total costs. My total cost being this area, let's say it's yellow right here, if that's my total cost, and so my profit is going to be right here, okay? If we look at this, a monopolist that's typical, is generally not allocatively efficient, so we know there's dead weight loss. They're generally producing a lower quantity than what would be efficient. They're also charging a price that would be higher than where a perfect competitor would produce. So monopolies, have some challenges from the economic standpoint. They're not efficient, right? They're not allocatively efficient. They do tend to generate decent revenues, but we'll see the revenues are even increased in a perfect price discriminating model. If we look at the perfect price discriminating model, we can notice a few things. So first of all, and the most important thing, is that the demand curve is equal to the MR curve, which is also equal to price, if that helps you. There is no separate MR curve. If you mess that up, you will be confused with perfect price discrimination, okay? So whenever you're doing a perfect price discrimination model, the key thing is this, okay? Demand and MR have to be exactly the same. This means this is your MR curve, it is your price, they are exactly the same. If we were to figure out, where should we produce, we know that the quantity that should be produced is the quantity that's profit maximizing. That hasn't changed at all. We're always profit maximizing. We profit maximize where MR equals MC. At this quantity, okay, the quantity is now a quantity that has attached to it not a single price, so you have to resist the urge to kind of go to this yellow dot and create a price over here. Remember, the monopolist is going to charge every single price, okay, along the demand curve. So there is no price, okay? There's no price because there's no one single price. It's every price, okay? We're going to be charging this price and this price and this price and this price, all of those prices, okay? So when we look at total revenue, we take the quantity and we take this entire area along the demand curve, okay? We can actually extrapolate that a little bit, and we're going to go like this, okay? This is going to be our total revenue, okay? That entire red box. And something that you're going to notice is, first of all, the perfect price discriminating monopoly is actually allocatively efficient, okay? Why is that? It is that way because MR is not less than demand. As soon as we put MR less than demand, our quantity that's profit maximizing shifts leftward on the x-axis, right? Because MR is going to be, less than demand. Because MR is equal to demand, okay, remember this is the big takeaway, this monopolist is able to produce a quantity that's not only allocatively efficient, but is also going to increase the total revenue for this monopolist compared to the earlier monopoly model, okay? So price discrimination equals greater total revenues, okay? Total revenues, remember, is not the same thing as profit. In order to see where we would be at with profit, we would need to take at this quantity, figure out what our costs would be, okay? If I just draw a straight line across, okay, don't get confused by that little bend in the ATC. I'm interested in this point, whatever this point is on the y-axis, we'll just call it x. But that particular price P, X or cost, it's really, I shouldn't call it price because we're not really putting price on this. It's a perfect price discrimination. But, X would be in dollars. It would express the ATC. This would be your total costs, okay? So where you see blue, that is your total costs, your total revenue minus your total costs, okay? We'll give you your economic profit, okay, which is going to be this area here, that's yellow, and it is a trapezoid. So you actually have to get this area right here, all the way up here. It's kind of a funky shape. It is not a rectangle, it is a trapezoid, but that is all. And if your ATC decreased because you had a reduction in fixed costs, that trapezoid could be huge, right? You could end up with a very, very large revenue. So you're seeing a high quantity and every single price included, okay? Remember that we are allocatively efficient. Because we're allocatively efficient, there's no dead weight loss. This is a monopoly that economists would say, that's actually allocatively efficient. Society gets the quantity that society wants. Allocatively efficient marginal cost is equal to price. The other thing is that there's no consumer surplus because no consumer is getting a good deal. Every consumer is paying what they're willing to pay. However, there are extensive profits, and you can make an argument that because total revenue is greater with price discrimination, it is likely that profits will be higher with price discrimination. Okay, so that tends to be the case. I hope this was helpful, and if you have questions about this model, definitely ask. There is a free response question that's on Schoology for you to practice price discrimination. The answers are also there, so let me know if you have a question.